professional level. This is why. Okay, guys, so we have breaking news in college baseball. Now, we've been telling you guys for the last month and a half that coaches have really heard nothing from the NCAA with what's actually going on with these new roster changes, the new scholarship limits, etc. Every coach we've talked to over the last month has basically said the same thing. We're in a holding pattern right now. We have not been given, the go-ahead from NCAA with these new rules. We haven't been handed down any kind of official rule set that basically lays out all the guidelines for how they're supposed to move forward. And because of that, they've had no idea how they can go forward recruiting, especially with guys in the 25 class with all these changes. And, with the 26s and 27s also being affected, schools are just kind of in limbo right now in the recruiting process and have been on pause and on hold for the last month and a half. So breaking news today from Division One or D1Baseball.com. Obviously, you guys know who they are if you follow college baseball, talking about these new rule changes and why there's been a delay. So I'm going to pull this up right now, and we're going to read this article from D1 Baseball and just kind of see what's going on here, what's being held up. So NCAA settlement case on hold. That's not good, guys. What it means for college baseball from Kendall Rogers. The NCAA's landmark settlement that would change the dynamic of college athletics and college baseball forever is on hold after the judge in the case, Claudia Wilkin, questioned a portion of the settlement. All parties involved in the proposed settlement will report back in a few weeks. Then an agreement will be made, or this will potentially go to trial. The settlement going to trial would delay items such as revenue sharing, roster limits, scholarship limits, and more for at least a couple of years. That does not include the potential and likelihood of an appeals process. My pal, Ross Dellinger, they have a link to an article here that kind of goes over the high-level items that are being discussed in this case that are kind of making it go on hold. But just in the updated settlement terms, boosters from schools and collectives, it says, would be prohibited from compensating athletes through endorsement deals, and the settlement would have potentially reduced or eliminated such payments. Instead, schools can only pay players through a salary cap / revenue sharing system. This aspect of the settlement causing pause from the judge should not come as a surprise. In the current climate of college athletics, it would be naive to think that the NCAA could set guardrails on what athletes can make from booster clubs and collectives. So essentially, guys, one of the reasons this is on hold and coaches have kind of been in the dark on this is because this settlement has not been decided yet. We're going to read deeper into the article, but obviously right here it's saying, man, if this thing goes to trial, these rules may not be implemented for a couple years. But I want guys in the 25 class to still understand this. Until this gets settled, and I think it'll give us a date later on in the article, nothing is going to change with how the recruiting is being done in 25, because they can't all of a sudden go, and hope that, it goes to trial and just start over recruiting again, because then if it doesn't go to trial and they got way too many guys, they're going to have to cut more guys. So this is really a nightmare style scenario for guys in the 25 class, because now your best bet is that this gets settled. And what I think it says is basically later this fall and maybe even into the winter when that could happen. So your best case scenario is that happens, and at least coaches know what they can do by hopefully, 2 or 3 months from now. If this goes to trial, I mean, it's going to be a nightmare for college baseball recruiting, because then all of a sudden you're not going to know when it's going to be done, and it's going to be a nightmare. And so this also outlines how it was pretty irresponsible to make an announcement about all these changes like they were a done deal. And now, depending on what happens, it could be a few years before this actually comes, to fruition and actually is official in college baseball. So I know, a lot of the clients we work with are like, what's going on with what are coaches saying? And we've been saying the same thing. They're all saying the same thing. We have no idea what's going on. We haven't heard a thing. And now you're seeing why that's the case. So let's continue to go down. Another aspect of the settlement that is causing pause and caught my attention is the idea that third-party endorsement deals, which would be part of a revenue sharing model, would need to be submitted to a clearinghouse that would determine their validity. again, I mean, this is ridiculous. And I think Kendall does a great job. Like, who is the person or entity judging the validity of an endorsement deal? It goes back to the idea above of what the market is willing to pay. If Joe's Taco Shack is willing to pay Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers $2 million a year, I hope I said his name right, who is to say that deal might not be valid or might just be overkill from a payment perspective? It boils down to what the third party is willing to pay. Exactly. I mean, if you're going to start like the thing is, you opened Pandora's box with NIL and all this stuff. So you can't go back now and pick up all the pieces. Pandora's box been opened, and the fact that they're going to say, well, you get a clearinghouse is going to determine the validity. I mean, Kendall's exactly right. Who's going to be the guy determining the validity? What if this guy doesn't like Texas? What if this guy doesn't like the school that's given out this massive deal, or the at least a player from a certain school who's getting a massive deal from a third party? So, I think the judges, she's at, there's a lot of people that don't like the fact that players are getting this kind of money in college sports. But once you've opened that box, the judge rightfully is like looking at this, like, how are we going to do this? I mean, who's going to be the person that judges if it's real? And exactly, if Joe's Taco Shack wants to overpay and, lose out on a deal, let's say they gave him $2 million for a year, and his, doing that only really netted them $1 million. They lost $1 million, but that's their decision. It's a free market. They can do what they want. So I think rightfully so. It's a basic argument that would hold much weight should this case go to trial. We will soon find out if all parties agree on some of the amended settlement terms and if the judge feels like it should move forward. She has hesitations for now. So what does the decision to pause the settlement mean for college baseball? In essence, everything. Kendall just saying it perfectly. In essence, everything. The 34-man roster limit and potential to have unlimited scholarships on your roster are now held up as part of the settlement. Should a settlement be reached in the coming weeks, the changes would still go into effect in the fall of 2025. However, the settlement going to trial would delay those changes by at least a couple of years, and a trial date would not be set until at least the middle of next year. And who knows how long the trial would last and how long the appeals process would follow. It's a turbulent time for college athletics. And and who knows on timelines is the last thing college baseball coaches or administrators want to hear, but that's the reality for now. It's a turbulent time for college athletics, but I mean, in college baseball, it's like you're standing in the middle of a hurricane, just like getting tossed around and thrown around and trying to figure, okay, when is this ever going to end? And that's, the last 3 years we made that video. It's doing very well on YouTube, talking about the top 5 changes to college baseball and recruiting. If you're interested in watching that, go look it up on our channel on YouTube. But I mean, college baseball, let alone college sports, college baseball has been through the most turbulent changes and crazy times in the last 2 or 3 years of any sport, probably in the last 2 or 3 decades. So to add this on top of it, and again, hopefully, like Kendall says, should a settlement be reached in the coming weeks, everything would kind of go as planned. So there's still a chance. But I will say this, that the things that are on hold, like the third-party clearinghouse that's going to determine whether an endorsement deal is legitimate, I understand why a judge is holding that, it doesn't think that should be in the settlement. It thinks that needs to be looked at. Because again, I mean, you have a person in there that doesn't like a certain school or something. It just gives someone way too much power. But let's go into the last part here, and I'll give you kind of my synopsis before we end the video. The other thing to remember as part of this hold is that conferences/institutions still have not determined how many scholarships they will provide for baseball under the current settlement. At least 2 power conferences told me last month that they would have a framework for what they'd allow before the early signing period in November, provided a final settlement was reached in this case. So again, if they don't reach a final settlement before the end of this fall, schools are like, well, we don't have to come up with what we're going to do because they don't have, the rules not going to be changed. Coaches let's see, where did I end off here? But now that the case is on hold, a decision may not come anytime soon. Coaches had already been stressed about making brash roster decisions on a whim. This clouds the situation even more. For what it's worth, those same conferences expected their scholarship total to come in somewhere between 22 to 24, with the potential to add more down the road. There's also the potential that leagues will let each program govern how many scholarship it wants to hand out. College baseball will get more scholarships, and the roster limits will be trimmed from 40 to 34. Now we await the date this all begins. It could begin next fall. It could also stretch out to 2 to 3 more years. Okay, so my synopsis is this. Kendall, I think, is exactly right here. The myth out there right now, and what I'm seeing on Instagram and YouTube and X and everything else is that, oh, well, there's going to be way more scholarships in college baseball. The reality is that except for those couple power conferences Kendall mentions, like the SEC, certainly some ACC schools, and even maybe some in the with the restructured Big 10 and Big 12, we have to kind of wait and see. But the idea that, oh, everyone's going to have full rides now there's literally no one saying that. You can imagine the SEC going, having the highest amount of scholarships of anyone. But then after that, guys, I mean, it's going to be the schools that will go up from 11.7 even to like 24 is going to be a very small number. The majority of schools are going to stick at 11.7. So, and again, I mean, this is allowing that to go up. So like the foundation is there for schools to eventually get to a spot where they can add more stuff. But right now it's not going to be that. The other thing is, looking at some of these changes again, let's say if this goes to trial and this doesn't change for 2 or 3 years, these changes, I do think that's a positive because what these rules have done to the 25 class is honestly fairly criminal. Announcing this without it being a done deal had the largest effect of any recruiting class in decades. You're talking about people getting decommitted, coaches and you feel bad for the coaches too and the players. I mean, the coaches have to cut guys that they had recruited because, hey, we literally can't bring in this many guys if it's down to 34. So, but here's the positive. If this does get kicked down the road, I should say, for a few years, then the 25 class, that impact is not going to be recoverable. That impact has already happened. They're going to be in a bad spot no matter what. But it will give schools and baseball coaches time to adjust to kind of, okay, now we know what that's going to look like. So whenever it gets announced the changes will come, they'll be able to react and recruit on par with that and not have to, and they'll know, okay, we can't recruit this many guys and stuff like that. The other thing is now that schools will know that the coming scholarship changes, they'll be coming, whether it's in a couple of 2 or 3 years, they may be better prepared to put more money in scholarships. So obviously if this goes through, for the next coming fall, you're not going to see a huge amount of changes in scholarship money. And listen, I get it. Going from 11.7 to 22 to 24, like Kendall says here, I'm not saying that that's like a small change, but it's a big change. But the reality is that's going to be for maybe 25 to 30 schools in the country. Maybe. The rest of the schools, you're not going to see hardly any change. But if this gets kicked down the road for 2 to 3 years, you may have schools at that point be like, you know what, we should be investing in this. With how big baseball is getting, and in 2 or 3 years it'll be even bigger. It may just be the amount of time needed to kind of incentivize more schools to put more money into the game. But hope you guys hope this covers everything that's kind of been released, guys. And again, hope this helps you guys understand just how crazy this last month and a half has been for college coaches and recruits in the 25 class. Because, we've gotten tired of saying it, not only talking about it with coaches, but with our clients, is saying, guys, no one knows what's going on. No one has heard anything. And now we kind of have a better idea of why that's the case. So stay tuned, guys. As this continues to unfold, we'll have more breaking news videos. So hit that follow button, like, subscribe, whatever you got to do. And we'll keep you guys updated with not only what's going on in recruiting in college baseball, but stuff that has to do with development and everything like that. If you're looking for help in the recruiting process, head to our website, elitesportsadvising.com, fill out an eval request. One of our regional advisors will meet with you, give you an evaluation on where you could end up and where you're at right now, and talk to you about kind of how we handle the recruiting process. Appreciate the support, guys, and stay tuned for the next video.